Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Bob Hoeft and serve as the research coordinator for the NREC program. NREC, to me, is one of the best, it is the best program that has existed during the time period that I've been involved with soil fertility in 3 or 4 different states over nearly a 40-year time period. It gives us an opportunity to do things that we've never had before. So I'm pleased with it. I'm very proud of it. I'm excited about it and what will transpire with this program over the coming years. For those of you that may not be familiar with NREC, in 2012, the Illinois legislature, passed the enabling legislation for the program. It created a system where an assessment of 75 cents per ton is collected and is available for NREC research. That bill was signed into being in August of 2012, and in 2013 the first proposals were accepted and funded and put into operation. Well, did I click this? Why NREC? Well, there are 2 real driving factors here. Supposedly, by 2050, we're going to double the population in the world. That means a lot more people to feed. And we need to start now if we're going to produce enough food to feed that many people by that point in time. Secondly, while we've always had a concern about the environment, that concern is elevating. Illinois EPA is developing the Illinois nutrient loss strategy. They've released the preliminary copy of that. And if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to take a look at that document, because it talks about what Illinois agriculture can do to reduce nutrient loss. I'll show you that in just a second. Well, let's see that now. I didn't put them all up here, but they're suggesting if we reduce N rates to the current recommendation on 10% of the land, will reduce nitrogen loss by 10%. Using an inhibitor with all fall applied N would reduce it another 10%. And cover crops, it's projected on all tile drain acres would reduce that N loss by 30%. Now, these numbers may or may not be accurate. They don't have a lot of research data behind a lot of them, I don't think. And so what the NREC program is really aiming to do is to get ground truth on this. How do these numbers compare? How does actual research data compare to what is projected here? In the last few weeks, another, I think, major issue has developed in Iowa. The Des Moines Water Works is considering, and in fact, I think they voted to do it, to go ahead and file suit against individual producers for contamination of water coming into the, I forget what the creek is out there, but feeds the water supply. You know that Des Moines has had for many years a system to remove nitrates out of the water coming in whenever those nitrate concentrations were above the 10 part per million standard. That is a very costly venture for the waterworks company. Now, as an aside, what I find interesting is what they do with the nitrates when they take them out. They put them back in the river on the other side of the plant so that somebody on downstream, unless the water gets diluted, somebody else downstream is going to have to take them out again. But that's what's allowed, and it's what occurs. But these kinds of suits are going to change how we do business considerably if they're successful with them. Now, we've been operating for 3 years. We've just recently, like in fact last week, the NREC Council voted on this year's projects. We've had roughly 30 projects every year. Now, the 30 projects include the renewals, so it's not a total of 90, but it would be a total of, I don't know, somewhere around 55 to 60 projects that we've had submitted to us. Out of those, each year we've funded, or they have funded, 20 to 25% of the projects coming in. So it's a pretty high funding rate relative to most granting agencies. It seems low if you're looking at it that only 1 out of 4 gets funded, but the council is being very selective in what they're putting forth for funding. And they are funding a number of projects very well. This doesn't mean that those that didn't get funded aren't good projects. It's just that we ended up running out of money before that point in time. Of those, 8 of them have been nitrogen related. It's actually even more than that. They're nitrogen related in terms of crop production, those 8. There are 2 more down here that we're looking at soil nitrogen. Those should all be lumped together in reality because they're going to look at crops as well. Cover crops, either in total or in part, 5 projects have information being gathered on the impact of cover crops. There are 3 educational programs ongoing. One of the first projects ever funded was the ammonia safety program, which is an educational program. That's the only project completed at this point in time. And it's being used all across the Midwest and further on beyond that. There's also a CCA program that's been proposed on the 4 Rs, in fact, certification in 4 Rs, and you'll be seeing more on that in the near future. I mentioned the soil nitrogen. We've got to start identifying new ways to help producers determine how much N they need. Phosphorus, we haven't had a lot of proposals in, but we did have 2 in, and I'll talk about one of those in just a minute, that was very effective. Wetlands, we've got 2 projects coming in there where they're using wetlands to get rid of the contaminants coming out, the nitrogen and phosphorus. And we have one project that is pretty unique in the buffer crops that they're using in those areas to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus concentration. And then most recently, soil health has come into the program as well. Now, many of the things I'm going to talk about here are going to be talked about in much more detail as we go through the day. This is kind of our landmark projects in many respects. 2 tile projects where they are going to use different nitrogen management systems on these specific tile. And we'll be monitoring the amount of nitrate coming out for each treatment. This should give us some very good data to relate back to the EPA strategy that I was talking about earlier. These are just getting underway. One is a project that Emerson's involved with, and you're going to hear again more about that. Lowell Gentry is going to be here in a little bit from the U of I. And then another one is up at ISU, where Dr. Armstrong is working on that particular one. In both cases, they do have cover crops in the system. They're also looking at time of N application. They're looking at systems, not just rates, not just time, but a whole system in here. And I think we're going to really gain a lot from these projects. These are very costly to get all that equipment in there, very costly to run the programs. Emerson's going to be talking a lot more about nitrogen. I throw this table up I'm going to say something, I hate it when any speaker says, I know you can't read this, but I just wanted you to see this. That yellow line goes across there, shows you the highest yielding treatments averaged across three locations. The thing you probably can't read is what it is, and it's broadcast urea at planting time. How many times have you heard us collectively all say, don't broadcast and leave urea on top of the ground? Well, Emerson points out that it has agrotane with it. That offers real potential, and obviously it did work here because it did come in with the highest yield of any of the treatments out there. There is some other research out this year that does show, again, urea or UAN on top of the ground looking very, very good. Well, what happened? It had to have rained right after it was put on in most of those cases for it to do that. My point is, it takes more than 1 year of data to really get the information that we need to be sure of. This will be talked about a little bit later. This is a project, again, at ISU, where they're looking at how farmers make decisions, what farmers are doing. And I found this very interesting, how farmers decide how much N they're going to use. 25 out of the 50, roughly 50% of them, still do it on a yield base. 10 of them do dealer recommendations. Now my guess is those two really tie together, that the people that are using yield base are doing it because their dealer told them to do that in the past. And that doesn't surprise me. The yield base, nobody's using more than 1.2. There are 5 of them using the 1.2, 11 of them using a pound, and 9 of them are down to 0.8. So we're moving in the right direction according to the data that's out there. Only 3 say they're using the calculator, but my guess is the dealers are using that. And so that puts them into that category as well. And we still have, or we do have 3 using a nitrogen test. Maybe with time we'll find one that will be really effective. We have to look at those soil nitrogen data and find ways to use them. And Emerson's going to be talking, I think, more about that as we go through here today. There's information that can be gained. We've just got to get the feet or the boots on the ground to get that data collected in there. Looking at tissue tests, kind of an after the fact, but we can tie that together with aerial pictures and maybe be able to detect when we can apply more in. And I think Dan will probably be talking about some of that as we proceed on through. Now, of course, if you've read in recent years, we can't put drones up yet to do it, but maybe with time we can. Cover crop. We're in our 3rd year with cover crops now. They've had some challenges the first 2 years, problems with stand establishment, problems with maintenance of the plants, of winter survival. Those kinds of things are going to have to be worked through before cover crops are going to be very popular, I think, around the state. Phosphorus runoff, some excellent data showing the simplest solution is get it under the ground. You get it under the ground, it's not going to run off. But if you put it on top of the ground with either no-till or with strip-till, in fact, with strip-till it's worse than with the no-till. You're going to get more runoff because you've got disturbance out there in that soil. These, I mentioned the multifunctional buffers. I think this is kind of a really unique project in that they're using crops that are not competitive with corn and soybeans. Now, there are not going to be very many acres of these buffers, but they're using, in the northern part of the state, crops that produce berries and fruit that can go into the Chicago specialty market. As we get into southern Illinois, they're using crops that really fit into the livestock market, forage crops that will not compete with corn and soybeans, but will be used very effectively down there. I'm anxious to see what the outcome of this will be. These are perennials that do suck up a lot of nutrients and get them out of the system and into crops that can in fact be used. With that, I repeat that I think this is one of the best programs that exists, I know it is, across the nation. It's a program that is the envy of most other states. I've had the opportunity to visit with our colleagues in some of the other states, and they only wish that they could get this kind of a thing accomplished. I'm going to stop right now and move on and get to the heart of what the results are coming from this particular project.